LoreWarrior Armour, the Rhino tank. Overview. Introduced in 2669, the Rhino was designed to provide heavy, long-range fire support to armoured companies, particularly in defensive formations. While not popular with the crews due to its lack of creature comforts and case, the Rhino can consistently deliver an impressive amount of ordnance on target and at long range, making it very popular with military strategists and tacticians. Capabilities. With two turret-mounted Delta Dagger LRM-20 launchers and a forward-facing Conan DT LRM-10 in the primary hull, the Rhino can deliver up to 50 long-range missiles in a single salvo. Usually, however, tank commanders will split those missiles, with the twin 20 racks focusing on the main target and the LRM-10 held in reserve to hit any secondary targets, or anything that escapes the initial barrage. While essentially a mobile long-range fire support platform, the Rhino can defend itself if attacked directly. Two Star Flash medium lasers are mounted on the turret, giving them a 360-degree field of fire. They are more than adequate against other armour, and they pack sufficient punch to give light mechs pause. The Rhino is slower than many tanks of similar mass, with a 54 kph top speed, but is by no means the slowest. Though its armour is adequate against most attack, the lack of cellular ammunition storage equipment means the 4 ton of long-range missiles that the Rhino carries are vulnerable. The lack of case is generally regarded as the design's greatest flaw. The troopers who crew the Rhino are likely to disagree. There's almost no provision for crew comfort, a point often raised by the tankers who serve aboard the Rhinos. It's generally believed that the original designers envisioned the heavy tank remaining in one place for extended periods, with the crews bivouacked elsewhere when not sitting in their watch. Deployment. Since its introduction, the Rhino has been a standard tank for defensive and long-term armour deployments. It can be found in every military of the Inner Sphere. Periphery nations and any world lacking extensive battlemech assets will also position platoons of these to defend cities and drop ports. However, because of its relatively slow speed and reliance on missiles, the heavy tank isn't particularly popular with rapid strike or recon forces, which must be highly mobile and or spend protracted time away from resupply. The Rhino then is rarely found in mercenary units. Variants. There are no factory-produced variants of the Rhino. However, as with any design that's been in the field for near 4 centuries, there are a number of common field modifications. None affect the twin LRM-20s, and most address the Rhino's lack of short-range punch, a handicap should its position be overrun. It's common to see the LRM-10 swapped out for a 6-tube SRM, with the freed-up space and tonnage going to whatever mix of machine gun or flamer that the crew thinks will best defend them against infantry. Though it's possible to mount small lasers within the SRM-6 modification, heat build-up becomes a problem, one with potentially disastrous consequences given the lack of case. It's also been confirmed that the first Taurian armoured lancers field one Rhino with a brace of hull-mounted medium lasers. No technical data is available, but even with all available space devoted to additional heat sinks, this would be a dangerous vehicle to operate. Notable crews. 1st century, 3rd Maniple. Though most of the 2nd Auxilia Loricatus, the armour legion of the 2nd Legio Cataphracti, is comprised of Gladius hover tanks, the 1-3 is comprised of 5 aged Rhinos, all in original configuration. Immediately following the Marian hegemony's annexation of the Lothian League, the 2nd Legio was stationed on Lordnax and tasked with keeping the peace. Julius O'Reilly, son of Caesar Sean O'Reilly, took command of the 2nd Legio in the summer of 3060 and immediately set about hunting the Lothian resistance. The 1-3 was left to guard the Legion's central supply. In hindsight, it comes as no surprise that while the bulk of the 2nd Legio was scattered across the globe, the rebels would raid the supply depot in force. Faced with a massed attack meant to overwhelm them through sheer numbers, the 1-3 responded with sheer numbers of their own. Gunnery techs worked feverishly under fire to keep the 5 tanks loaded from stockpiled stores as the tank fired salvo after salvo. For 16 hours, the tireless 1-3 held out against overwhelming odds until Julius O'Reilly and the battlemech cohorts arrived to crush the rebel forces. Yes, the Rhino, mast, 80 tons, movement type, tracked, power plant, pit band, 240, cruise speed, 32 kph, flank speed, 54 kph, armor provided by Panther Skin 7, smooth. Armament, 2 Delta Dagger LRM-20 missile racks, 2 Starflash medium lasers, and 1 Conan DT LRM-10 missile rack. Manufactured by Leopard Armour, primary factory on Terra, communication system as a Tranel GL5, and targeting and tracking as a Tranel OT-37L. The Rhino, 80-ton internal structure, has an engine, 240, cruiser 3, flanker 5, not surprising for an 80-tonner, with a whole 10 heat sinks, not even doubles, just regulars. It has 64 armour on the front, 54 on each side, 40 on the rear, and 60 on the turret. It is thick, chunky, and it's kind of beautiful. I do like it. Though the glass cockpit thing on the front is a little bit worrying, I have to admit. Has twin LRM-20s in the turret and 2 medium lasers in the turret as well, with a single LRM-10 on the body. It has 18 rounds of fire for the LRM-20s, so 9 rounds each there, and 12 rounds of fire for the LRM-10. I really like it, personally. I love a design of a unit that's got one job, and that is to dump missiles on the target and make sure that they are dead. It's also not a bad-looking design either. The Rhino looks pretty cool. It's a big, wide-tracked thing, which is what you'd expect. Maybe the turret's a little small and the medium lasers are a little big on one of the artworks, especially from TRO 3050 upgrade. But yeah, I love the design. I love the idea behind the whole thing. I like the fact that it's very powerful, but it also has a significant drawback. It's ammo-reliant. It doesn't have much in the way of any short-range protection. So it requires you to carefully use it to make sure that it doesn't get flanked by fast-moving light mechs or fast-moving vehicles or hell, even infantry getting close. It has to be covered, but in the right place, in the right position, it can do a lot of damage very quickly. And yeah, that's the kind of thing I love to see in MechWarrior and BattleTech. It's the kind of thing where you don't end up in this thing where it's a machine for everything. Oh, it needs to have missiles and lasers and PPCs and fucking like massive fucking armor plating and a really big engine. Oh, it can jump as well, and it's got double heat sinks and ECM and fucking case and a NART launcher and a fucking dog biscuit provider and everything else that it needs. It just does what it's built to do. And that's what's really good about it. And I just love these kind of designs and these kind of specific role functions within BattleTech's wider universe. The idea now that you can picture that this thing is used across the entirety of the inner sphere and even the periphery, where it's just set up in defensive positions where you can now picture these things, as it says, protecting places like drop ports and outer areas of cities and smaller backwater planets where they can't afford battle mechs. And having a battle mech is a big deal on these worlds, but these kind of vehicles are more than adequate to the task of protecting important facilities. And it helps, I think, to water down this idea that battle mechs are just plentiful. Like there's BattleTech, there's Hebe in the background, that there's battle mechs are just shitting out of factories like 1,000 a day produced. Get them to the front. This idea that the universe is just absolutely crammed with such vehicles of battle mechs is an unfortunate perversion created by the games, because naturally the games want to put you in the cockpit of a mech, not a tank or an aircraft, which makes sense. But it gives this skewed perception that mechs are really, really plentiful everywhere, and they're not. Probably per year there are thousands of mechs made, but they're across so many different variants, so many different chassis, and some of them are so rare by a certain point, depending on where you're playing, 3025 being a good start point, that the idea of losing a mech is anathema. It's you would rather flee the field than take any significant damage to your mech, because you don't know whether you're going to get the parts to fix it, and hell, you might not ever be able to replace it. And on backwater worlds or some periphery states that need these kind of machines, a few battle mechs they're worth they're worth the weight in gold, essentially, because they're so rare. But they're also such a deterrent for any pirates and the such. Oh, another thing is, pirates aren't rocking around realistically around the periphery states with tons of mechs themselves. Most pirates are going to be infantry based with vehicles, maybe a few mechs spread around. realistically. So any pirates that hit a world and shit, they've got a lance of mechs, that's going to make them think differently. They might pick a different target, or something far less heavily defended. So yeah, you'll see a lot of worlds protected by things like the Rhino, like just frontline tanks like Scorpions and scout vehicles and wheeled stuff like that. And that's what I love about it. That's why the Rhino is great. I love the fact that, you have a vehicle here. I also like the fact that the crew, it isn't a feckin' Word of Blake crew or something. It's a bunch of people from the Marians, for God's sakes. How often do they get mentioned? Virtually never. Whoever wrote this one was tuned in. I love it. But I've rambled on too long with this one, so I'll leave it there. So thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good week, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.